I just appreciate you doing this, seriously.
Hey, no, like I happened upon your the history of Scud and was just like blown away by the extensive research and effort that went into it that I was like very um just very touched by it, you know? It's hard to kind of as a creator, you know, you don't know if you're reaching people sometimes, you know?
Yeah, I can imagine, but just so you know, you definitely hit me hard, man. I
Oh.
mean, Scud, dude, Scud opened the world to a lot of independent publications for me and changed the way that I looked at comics in a great deal of ways.
Yeah,
I know you're a busy guy, so just as a heads up, I just wanted to talk to you. I don't want to have like random questions that I missed in the documentary because there's some stuff that I am wondering about. the
sure.
main the main thing that I would love to do is just get behind the scenes stories, any anecdotes, good memories, bad memories, little tidbits, that kind of stuff that I might have missed. I know you're a busy guy. I'm sure you noticed by my documentary that I'm a bit of a OCD freak and I go long. Yell at me if you get tired, if you want to move on, etc. Just let me
No,
know.
no, no, no. This is good. I mean, I have some stuff that I have to do eventually, but you know, once I start talking, it's hard for me to stop sometimes. So, you know, but feel free to prompt me if there's something in particular as far as anecdotes and things. You know, there's stuff in your documentary where I'm like, well, you know, that's not exactly right, but you know,
I would love if there's stuff like that, I would love to know corrections. And I just want to get a good interview out there for people that are Scud fans to
mhm,
correct that kind of stuff
yeah,
and give them just a good, nice place to stop in and follow through the story. And if they like the interview, they can go and check out the longer documentary and they'll know the
right.
little mistakes I made at
Right,
that
right,
point.
right. But for the most part, it's like you were grabbing stuff from interviews. It's stuff that I said. You know, some of the stuff I'm gonna just I don't even remember doing that interview. So it's great to it's a nice little time capsule. That's why I'm going to do on my website like kind of like a Scud day where I've had interviews and things like that, and I would love to show um your history of Scud, you know, in three parts, you know, like if that's okay, you know, like I
Yeah, absolutely.
okay, okay, good, good, good.
Do anything you like with it, sir.
Right, 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 right. You know, and if you want to show this bit in interview on there too, I mean, like that's I mean that's um kind of like the place to go for all things me. So but yeah, but the one thing that came to mind is like where Harmon and I met. Like Harmon never went to art school. Harmon was like dropped out of Marquette University in Wisconsin, and we met each other doing stand up actually at a bar, and we kind of liked each other's bits. Like we were very pop culture oriented. He was doing stuff about Star Wars. I was doing stuff about like the Batman movies, and we were kind um, of that Mystery Science Theater 3000 generation obsessed with like reference humor and stuff. So we got along real good, and then we started doing improv workshops together, which led to like a short-lived radio show where we were writing sketches. And then once I started doing this comic book, you know, I think it was like yeah, it was issue 4 that I said, "Hey Dan, you know, like you're kind of made for doing this," and so we, and ever since then we've been writing together, you know, even to this day. So, uh, so that was like my first thing. Is like, oh, was Rob and Dan roommates? Well, we were roommates once we moved out to Los Angeles, but we were never roommates during like the beginning of Scud. So it's kind of like a you know a compressed version of what of our relationship. But I mean, like that was like so small that I was like, yeah, whatever. Um, but what there's got to be something that you've been like going, wow, wish I could get Rob in a corner and make him answer this question. Like what's
Well, the main thing is that everything that I found from you for interviews, is very small and compartmentalized, and they usually only deal with a very specific either aspect or time period of Scud.
Yeah.
And because of that, there just isn't a lot of talk about your initial motivation to do the book, what your initial interest in art. Like you talked about growing up and doing art as kind of a way of drawing attention and a little, showing off a little bit and just making friends and,
Yeah.
and that kind of thing. But a lot of people that get into comics are comic book freaks. That did not seem to be the case for you. So it would be very cool to find out that segue where you took that right turn, after you broke up with that girl or whatever.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Well, the thing that I'm pretty open about, and I think a lot of artists are like this way, is that, and in you being an accomplished artist yourself, that I don't know if this works for you, but I'm just to kind of volley back and forth. Uh, like that was my way of getting accepted. First it started with my parents. Like I would draw something, and my mom would go, "Wow, you really draw well, you draw good, I really like that." Or like a teacher goes, "Well, Robbie is the best artist in class." And then you start creating an identity. I was known as the artist from a very early age. I even remember like being called that in like preschool. Like that was like my chosen identity. And I always, a lot of people like go, "Well, how do you make it? How do you get into the business?" And I think really is like knowing what you want to do, knowing where you want to go, because you start putting yourself in these positions where these things can happen. You start hanging out with the birds of a feather, people who think like-minded, like they also want to create and do art and tell stories and things. And I was like that at an incredibly early age. I look back at it going, wow, like preschool, I was like, oh, I'm going to do um I'm going to be an artist. I want to do cartoons. I want to do movies. I want to write and direct movies. I want to be Spielberg. I want to be George Lucas. I want to be Tim Burton. Like I mean, like that was like, and that gradually turned into I want to be Sam Raimi. I want to be Robert Rodriguez. I want to be Peter Jackson. I want to be Tom Savini. I want to be George Romero. Like as I grew older, like my taste, my target was in the same area, but it was always like film. It was never like comic book, really. I mean, like I mean, I, and I would say that the reason that I didn't really get into comic books was because it was never drawing that way was never natural to me. Drawing people and physiques and poses and things like that. That was never something that came easily to me. Like I would try. I mean, I found anime an easier thing to kind of replicate, and that was kind of my art school, is like going, oh, I like the way that looks, but I like it even more because I could kind of draw it. Whereas like I could not draw the Marvel way or the DC way or the eventually the Image way, but I found anime to be something a little bit more, because it was like this hybrid between like cartoony and realism and whatever. But um I really gravitated towards that. I don't know if I gravitate towards, unfortunately, the things that come easiest to me, and that's why art was easy to me, because it was instant gratification. You would draw something, show it to somebody, and they would go, "Wow, that's great." Whereas, like, "Oh, I'm going to be the captain of the football team." There's a lot of training involved. There's a lot of social politics that you got to cut through. You got to be really into it, and because that didn't come easy to me, I just rejected it and went, no, I'm going to go full bore into this thing that is working for me and giving me my daily dopamine hit of art. So uh, I think as we grow as people, we're always looking for an identity, and I felt like um locked into my identity pretty quickly, and that was art. Art was the main thing. Comedy was second, and eventually it became like storytelling and directing and marketing and all the stuff that I do today. But it all started with like I want to be this sort of thing, and never. But I loved movies. I loved storytelling. I loved fantasy, sci-fi, and horror at a very early age, and became very obsessed with it. And that was really it, you know. And I again, like, I don't think I was into comics until I was in college, when I started being introduced to independent comics that were black and white. Like I was really into anything that didn't wasn't like Spider-Man or the Hulk or whatever. Any kind of like, if it was something that uh I've never heard of this, or this is a style that does not look like anything else I've ever seen before, I would eat it up. I would love it. Like, I was a big fan of this comic called Roachmill. I don't know if you've ever heard of Roachmill, but it's like that first issue of Roachmill is a big influence on the first issue of Scud. It's about like this mutant exterminator that looks like he's a cross between a cockroach and Clint Eastwood. So he's got like a beard, he's got like the squint, and he's got like all these arms out that has like multiple guns. And he's hired to go into. Do you know what I'm talking about? Have you seen this?
Yep. Yes, I
It
have. I know what
Yeah,
you're talking about now. As soon as you said the guns coming out of the beard, I was like, I
yeah,
remember that.
yeah. It was black and white, and I think he was hired to kill like an infestation of these kind of rat monsters in a factory. And I was like, oh, okay, well, that's, I mean, a lot like Scud being hired to kill Jeff in the Marvin's Mannequin. So that was, you know, kind of like the beginning of it. And I really liked, yeah, I just liked anything that just was off the beaten path. But I'm like that not only with comic books, but any kind of movie or TV show. Like, I was a huge Doctor Who. I am a huge Doctor Who fan, just because nobody knew what the fuck it was. You know, like
Dude,
watching.
I feel you. When I grew up, nobody knew who the fuck Doctor Who was. I remember tracking down those VHSs
Oh
and having
yeah.
them mailed over from England. All right.
Oh yeah.
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 I would be like, people would be going out to the roller skate rink on Friday nights, and I would be, no, I'm staying home and watching public television and watching my latest episode of Tom Baker. And people would be like, what the fuck are you talking about? I'm like, no, don't you see the guy with the scarf and he gets into a phone booth and he goes into the future and he fights like giant like bugs? It's the best show ever. And 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 I think that's another part of my identity. I think this is what you and I are talking about, is like, what our interests are, what are it's like your interest versus your what makes you accepted, what makes you rebellious against that acceptance. Because that's it. Like, I just wanted to be accepted. I just wanted people to see me. So if I would draw something, people would see me. So it's like, but also the rejection of that acceptance. I mean, like, I liked things that people didn't know about, because I felt like, this is this is this is my comic. Roach Mill. No one's ever heard of it. This is my comic book. Nobody heard of this British science fiction show from that's 20 years old, back in the 80s. I was like, no, this is my show. I'm glad nobody likes it. I'm glad I'm the only person who like it. And then that became like music. It's like, oh, no one's ever heard of They Might Be Giants or Oingo Boingo or all the stuff that I listen to, Ministry and Skinny Puppy, and they're like, what are you doing? Well, it's Motley Crue or whatever is what people really listen to. And I'm like, no, I don't like. There was a rejection of that status quo. And it's interesting because, as a person that started his identity with the goal of getting accepted, rejecting, I could get accepted more if I fell in line so there is like this kind of frustration where you're like, I want to be accepted, but I don't want to like anything that's already accepted. And my wife Kate is took me years to really kind of understand like or accept that kind of weirdness of what I'm trying to articulate is that like I would always go like, oh, how come I don't get like a huge line at Comic-Con, or how come I'm not up for this directing this film or TV show, or how come whatever, like and Kate would be very brilliantly like say, well, look at everything that you like. Look at all of your VHS collection. Look at all the TV shows you like. You don't like anything that's popular. You like cult stuff. You like underground stuff. So of course you're going to write cult stuff and underground stuff. And Scud is cult and underground. It's not Bone. It's not even Bone, like it's under that. It's not Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. It's not Marvel. It's not DC. And it wasn't created to be. It was targeting a very specific type of fan, us.
That's really interesting. And it's something that's kind of a through line, even with everything that you still do now, where it's like very, even Heat Vision and Jack, where you got Jack Black, this legendary pilot and stuff.
Yeah.
20 years later, 15 years later, everybody is still talking about that pilot, but
And
it's
it
this
never
like,
got picked up. It's
I was
only
gonna,
got, yeah, and that was another example that was created. Like when I first pitched it, I said, this is something that I want people to discover on their own. I think it should be like late night HBO, like Friday night. It's like something that you would like, I'm going to tune in and watch Mr. Show. And then immediately afterwards would be Heat Vision and Jack. And nobody wanted to hear that. They were just like, well, that's a failure. That's that we want you. We think this has the potential because it's got Ben Stiller and Jack Black and Owen Wilson involved. It's like this should be primetime Fox. And I was like, yeah, but it's not designed to be that way. It's not made to be that way. It's supposed to be what it ultimately became, which is this thing that you stumble across, or somebody goes, have you ever heard of this? There's the people that know and the people that don't know. And I like being the people that know. Like I my one of my first writing assignments was working on Mystery Science Theater 3000. This is how I met like Joel Hodgson, who became like a terrific fan of mine, or a friend of mine. I'm a fan of his. He's a fan of whatever. Uh, but I he people they did all of this reference humor, and they would go, well, what about when you do such deep cuts, aren't you afraid that somebody might not get the reference? And Joel said, the right people will. And that's who I hang out with. The right people. The right people know. Like if I mention something, they go, oh yep, I know who Tom Baker is. Oh yeah, I've seen all of Red Dwarf. Oh yeah, I know that music. Like that's my audience. And I've come to terms with that it's like that's my version of success. It might not be monetary or whatever, but I feel like if I was a kid back in Mayville, Wisconsin, I would be a big fan of Heat Vision and Jack, a big fan of Scud the Disposable Assassin. I would be a big fan of Rick and Morty, which is the biggest thing that I've ever worked on right now. Um, so it's interesting picking apart like the acceptance versus the rejection of that acceptance. I think maybe there's like as you grow older, and especially after puberty, and you kind of go, huh, you start like kind of self analyzing yourself and going, huh, I'm being kind of needy with drawing to get people to like me. I feel like I should reject that and draw stuff that is maybe unsettling. That's when I started getting into like horror, and I would do a lot of gore drawings, like just like lots of eyeballs and intestines and things like that, stuff that that you would see in Gore Shriek or Fangoria or something like that. And I got really into that kind of stuff because I think that was my own way of rejecting that. I don't need to be accepted. I'm not needy, even though you you it's human nature to need community and acceptance.
Yeah, I
So
mean
I
that's
think
what
that
we're all
was it.
searching for.
Yeah, and I feel like we're kind of taught to be ashamed of that. Like, oh, who's the cool guy? The cool guy that doesn't give a shit if anybody likes them or not. Take me or leave me. I don't care. And you don't want to be the person that's like, oh, I just like, I'm sure there was somebody is just like, oh, you're just drawing to get attention or whatever. Oh, you're so attention starved, or it's like whatever, and that's looked at as a negative when it's something that everybody experiences. And then of course, like when after puberty and like girls became involved, that was my way of like going, well, I'm not athletic. I never will be athletic. I'm not the most confident guy in the world. Rejection is affects me quite a bit, which I recently found out is like a side effect of autism and ADD is like having severe rejection syndrome. Like when somebody rejects you, you really go through an emotional, like it's like just destroys you. And I feel like thank God I had my art because I was able to deal with rejection through my art. Like I would pour it into the book. Like I mean, Scud was born from rejection. I was infatuated with what this one girl that was like it was fun for a bit, but come on, I don't want to be your girlfriend, and I just I was just destroyed, and so I needed to prove that I was worth something by accomplishing something big, and that's why like Scud's got a broken heart, Heartbreaker series. That's the idea was to not only make the comic book but get it out there and have like it on the shelves to go see I'm worth something, you know um and and that's and then and later on, like as I was in a relationship through the bulk of Scud, you could see it going up and down, and that character was, that emotional through line was, that's where the Susudio Scud thing kind of the relationship developed, and eventually was a part of the reason that it got put on pause for 10 years. It's just things become very, I don't know if you're like that with your art, but do you, like when you're going through an emotional struggle, whether it's like romantic or just stress in general, of the day-to-day life, do you put that in your art? Is that your escape?
I try with my documentaries, obviously I try not to,
Uh-huh.
I try to remain unbiased as possible, but you've seen my piece on Scud. You know that I get very emotional and kind of swept up in things. And I think it's kind of obvious that these comic books maybe mean a little bit more to me than just pictures and words on
But
paper.
that's what
They,
I connected with. That's what I connected with. And I don't think you should be ashamed of that. I feel like that is what people, whether they will admit it or not, gravitate towards vulnerability because it's something that this society does not reward. In fact, like vulnerability is almost like a target on your back. Like it's almost an invitation to exploit. You're a vulnerable person. Oh, really? Well, then you won't mind me using you, taking you advantage because you're so desperate for somebody to pay attention to you. So there's that. So I would say that the a big reason why Scud is still loved by a certain type of fan is because of that vulnerability that I was like I have this in my head. I want to get rid of it. I need to. I have nothing else but my own sadness, happiness, fears or whatever. Um, put it on the page, put it in the frame, put it in the dialogue balloon, and I believe that's why people keep coming back to it. And those final four, there was a lot of, like, if you like really look at that stuff, there was like there's scenes where like Scud is like, I almost gave up. I don't know if I can do this. I'm a cowboy. Cowboys don't quit. I will finish this. It's me going, this is I don't know if I can do this anymore. Like, this is really pushing me to the limits. And that it's all on the page. It's like, a page is a day in my life. How do I feel that day? Like, how is it? Um, that always goes into the page, and I do that with my writing too. Like if I'm working on a Rick and Morty script, if something is in my chest that I'm feeling very, very, um, it's very three-dimensional. It's just very, it's right there. I find a way to put it on the page. Sometimes it stays, sometimes it doesn't, but it's that's kind of what I'm known for in Rick and Morty, is that understanding of heartbreak, and not that fearlessness when it comes to, no, I'm going to go this way. I'm going to go this way, and and not be afraid of it, because I don't. I mean, even though the show is a comedy, I do feel like you need to have those moments of vulnerability and those moments of authentic emotion. um, I think that's super important in any art. Authenticity is what people are really buying. I think. I mean, you can be.
It
Um,
is, and it's what I love the most about your art, Rob, is the
Thank.
authenticity.
Yeah, I think it's just it's um, because I'm not the best artist in the world. I would say there's a lot of people that are a lot better than me, including yourself, sir. Just as watching your art, but the thing that I do is what I've told people when people go, well, how do you find your style? What do you do? And it's like, what are you bad at? Don't concentrate on what you're good at. Concentrate on what you're bad at. The reason you think it's bad is because it doesn't look like anything else. It's like people go, oh, this is good art because we've accepted this type of art as good, and because your stuff doesn't look like that, it's considered bad art. So if you are not good at drawing humans or the Marvel style, what can you do and turn it up to 11? And that's what I did. I was like, oh, I hate drawing human faces. I find them very boring and hard to make iconic. So look at Scud. It's basically a smiley face without a mouth. It's the most non-face thing in the world. And I was still able to make that blank sheet emote. And I think the emotions can be there if like your quote unquote talent isn't. So I would say anything that you're insecure about, that's what makes you special. That's what
Abs-
makes.
That's
Yeah.
so, that's one of the things that's really attracted me to Scud, was how you were able to put yourself into it. And the more I discovered about Scud, and the more you read into and you start looking into Scud, I think the more of you that I discover in there. One of the other things I was curious about was, I know you said you were drawn to anime, excuse me, drawn to anime because you didn't really draw anatomy and that kind of stuff,
Yeah.
like necessarily exactly how everybody else did. Were there any other were there was Batman the animated series
Yeah.
and John Chris also, I
Yep.
believe, that
Yep.
you cited. But was there anywhere else that you were drawing from to create the look of Scud? Because that book just it it doesn't look like anything else I've ever seen. It's a wonderful blend of about a million things,
Yeah. Yeah.
but absolutely nothing at all.
Yeah. I would say I was inspired by um like Eon Flux was another big one, was a huge one because that was like the target. Like, oh, I want to be on liquid television. This will be Eon Flux. Um, Roy Lichtenstein, I was just out of art school and kind of obsessed with pop culture and op art and also just like just like looking at what Andy. I mean, if you look at like that first issue, there's like that Andy Warhol repetition, the soup cans in different colors. There's like the Franks going in. It's very like, and that's where the Zipatone came from. Like the dots were all very Roy Lichtenstein and inspired. Uh, and there's also like Art Nouveau, the lines of Art Nouveau. If you look at like there's like a lot of whiplash lines that I really like enjoyed. Trying to think of other stuff. I was really big into mid-century modern style, graphic style. That was like big. I would say that was like mostly because of John Kricfalusi and Ren and Stimpy, because I love that simplicity, that old school like Looney Tunes where you look at the backgrounds and it's just like really like just a slab of color and then an outline of a staircase and just I love that stuff. I love that stuff so much. And because I just felt it was like so freeing. It was like somebody going, I don't give a fuck. It's just like whatever. I wanted to be an artist that could draw photorealism. In art school, I was just like trying so hard and it would never click with me. And what I that was a very pivotal moment in my last year of art school, is letting go of the thing that I wanted to do and leaning into the thing that came natural to me. I remember like just like, what do I like? I like big gestures. I like big blocky shapes. And I would draw like, I like breaking things down into like, is it a square, circle, or a triangle? Like what are the shapes that I can break things down, and then just very quickly, just like I love the motion of my hand going around like a circle, or just carving into like the empty page with a pencil was always so um fun to me. And I was like, that, I think that was really it is. It's like trying to draw photorealistic was work. It was a chore. Drawing with the style that I created was fun. And that was like the kind of like, I'm going to create, design a character that is fun to draw because I'm going to be drawing this character forever, a lot. I mean, over and over and over and over again. And also in the back of my mind, I go, well, an animator one day is going to be drawing thousands and thousands and thousands of drawings of this. This is back when everything was like drawing. So let's make it as easy as possible for them so they can put more work into other stuff. Like if a character is very, very clunky and has a lot of detail, you can only do so much with it. But if it's just like super, super easy, you can make them, you can do so much more acting. um so that was kind of like the that was like my thought process.
Brilliant. I would have never thought of that word acting, but that's exactly what Scud is doing because the
Yeah.
movement on the page is just, it's so dynamic and explosive. And speaking of movement, I'm curious. Yeah, I came out of the generation where originally, and I'm sure you did too, where originally like self-publishing comic books, as far as like actually putting out a comic book, printing it yourself, was an impossibility. And then
Yeah.
Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles happened, and the black and white explosion. And there was the boom that happened, and then that kind of all imploded. But during the early 90s, there was a small trickle, like some really interesting independent publications came to happen.
Hmm.
And you were definitely on the forefront of that movement. And one of the things, I did find a lot about your kind of your motivation and your emotional mindset kind of stuff when it came to creating Scud, but not the initial nudge, that decision of, I am actually just going to print a comic book myself. How did you make that leap? That, I mean, that would have been 1990, in a 92, beginning of 93, I
It was
assume.
like 93, 93 was um when the first issue was drawn, like towards the fall of 93, and then Scud came out end of February in 94. Uh so what happened? And so this is a part of my, I'm a big believer in manifesting things. So, what is in mind tends to come to mind, or whatever, like. And I think back then I was delusional, where I was just like, well, it's just going to happen. It's just going to happen. I graduated from art school. um I was doing improv shows like weekly, but not making any money, and I was living with like two or three other people. My rent was like pretty cheap, but I was just like crammed into a corner. And I was hanging out with Dan like every day and smoking pot and just like kind of like doing anything, which felt like, oh, I was doing this for years, when it actually probably was like, a couple of months. And we were doing improv workshops, and then one at the end of one show, uh, one of my teammates on this improv players, Peter Alberts, met a guy. His name was Marlo Newman, and Marlo said, "You guys are super funny. This was a great show." And Peter said, "Well, what do you do for a living?" And he goes, "Oh, I print comic books." And Peter was like, "You got to meet Rob. Rob draws comic books." Met with him, and he goes, "You guys are really, really funny. I had a great time. This was a really good show. If you ever want to talk comic books, come over to my office." And I'm going out of town, but I'm back in a month. If you got like a comic book you want to show me, I can show you the ropes. And I didn't have a comic book. I had an idea for a comic book. I had this character. I don't even think it was named Scud yet, but I liked the idea of a coin operated killer assassin. You put quarters in. Originally, Scud had like a coin slot in his forehead, and you would just put coins in it. And I was like, I need a TARDIS. I need a police box to make it more iconic. So I put him into a vending machine, and I was like, oh, that's actually a funnier log line. Oh, you can go up to a vending machine and an assassin comes out and he kills anything. And because it's like um a disposable, it's like a disposable razor, it's like a disposable pencil or whatever. I don't know, whatever. But it would self-destruct. And I just kind of, and in the past I drew comic books but never finished them. I never finished a book because I was like, I was always like so obsessed with setup and and oh, we got to know like the inner workings of the world. And like long ago, like there was this mutant radiation leak, and then that's why the animals can talk now. And like I felt like there had to be some kind of big explanation why things were happening, and I would never get to the stuff that was fun, the action. I just wanted to get into the action. And I just started like getting into like John Woo and Jackie Chan again. Like nobody knew of these things. I was getting dubs. This is like 92. I was like getting dubs, like shitty VHS, like fifth generation copies of John Woo's Hard Boiled, and just blown away. And I'm like going, oh my God, I love this. I want to do this, but in a comic book. So that's where like the brevity of the first issue is just like, there's a monster in the basement, take care of it. Oh, outside, I'm gonna buy a disposable assassin to take care of it for me. And then I don't know, page 3 or 4, we're into it. He's loading up his guns. It's like that's where all that stuff, like, oh, here's a disc that will program your contempt and know everything about this. So I didn't have to sit around and have to create a situation where Scud didn't like Jeff or hated Jeff or whatever. And it just was like, okay, boom, he's programmed to do it. That's why he's a robot. This is the advantage of it. And that was the thing, and I think that's why people really enjoyed it, is that there wasn't a lot of talking going on. It was just a very quick, easy read. And there was a lot of reference humor in it, which was totally from Mystery Science Theater 3000. It's just lots of Space Ghost and Star Wars and stuff. I think people were into that kind of humor back then. And so I had, like, I think a month to draw up this comic book. And I it was around the same time where this girl did break up with me. And so I was like, okay, this is the fuse. This is the match that's being lit. This is the universe telling me, do it, go for it. And I drew the book, and I had like a little Xerox copy of it. I took it to Marlowe's office, and he looked through it, and he was like, yeah, this is fun. Let me tell you how to do it. What you're going to do is uh, there are these uh, printing, these catalogs that go out once a month that all comic book stores buy from, these catalogs. I think it was like Bud Plant, Diamond. It's just these big, thick. It's like this thick, and you page through them, and you go, "Oh, I'll take 5 of those. I'll take my regular run of Spider-Man." And this, you just like pick and choose. And he says you put that out, and then you print as much as you get, so you don't lose any money. So, like, you get orders for how many books, you print that much, and then you make the next one, you make the next one, the next one. And what he did, they were printing um comic books, but they were printing like Spider-Man. I think they were printing a lot of Image stuff. They specialized in holographic covers. Remember back in the 90s where they would have holograms on it, or that foil cover? That was their specialty. And they would print, like, I don't know, like 100,000 Spider-Man, and then they would have leftover sheets of paper at the end of the run. And they go, okay, what we'll do is we'll throw your book at the end of those and print it up, and then you whatever, and then you'll just make a profit off of that, or whatever. You'll Anyway, I was like, okay. uh and then I was sitting in this position of like going, huh, what do I do here? Do I just put my name in the book? And I'm looking through these catalogs, and it's just like, you get like 2 sentences in your name. Maybe you get like a little stamp. I was like, how am I going to stick out? How am I going to do this? Now, I had made like a couple $1,000 doing greeting card designs. It was like one of my first artist jobs. And I made, like, I think like maybe $2,000-3,000 or whatever. And it was like the most money that I ever had. And I wanted to sit on it, but I was like, well, I'm 23. I'm hopefully going to make $3,000 again in my life. This isn't going to be the last $3,000 that I ever have. I always wanted to do a comic book. If I'm going to do this, I'm going to do it right. And so I took all of that money and bought like these full page spreads, Scud the Disposable Assassin. And it was a very minimal, it was the front cover of issue number 1. And so I did that, and it just wiped me out. I didn't have any money after that. And so when the orders came in, we got like orders for, feels like like 3,000, maybe like 3,500 issues. And then I tell Marlowe, who's like the printer guy, who's used to doing the Hulk and Spider-Man and Spawn. He's like, how many did you get? And I was like, like under 4,000. It was like 3,500, and he was like, "Ooh, ooh," and I was like, "Yeah, ooh, that's not a lot, right?" He goes, "Yeah, it's not, but if you keep doing it, you'll eventually get up there. Go get them." And it wasn't until like later, um, like I was talking with like at Comic Con. At the Comic Con, you're like at your artist alley and you get to know everybody. And it was back in the '90s where it was like, oh, that's how I met like Jim Mahfood and Yonan Vasquez and all those guys. Like we would have and like I met Doug TenNapel and met Ben Templesmith and met Ben Edlin, all those guys, we'd sit and have like after show dinners or whatever, and people would go around the room. And I was going around, and they would say like, "How much did your first issue sell?" And I was like, "Oh," and the guy goes, "Oh, like 200." And another guy would go like, "Oh, wow, 500," or somebody, "Oh, I didn't even break 100," or whatever. And then it comes to me, and they were like, "How was yours?" And I was like, 3,000. And they were like, "What?" They were like so pissed off. And I was like, "I thought that was terrible." They go, "No, are you kidding? That's like amazing for a book that no one's ever heard of." It's like, and it took me a while to kind of understand, like, oh, that big investment really paid off.
It had to have, because I was working at a comic shop at the time and I was allowed to make small independent publication purchases for the store, like stuff that caught my eye. The Tick didn't catch that until like almost half a dozen issues in. John and the Homicidal Maniac, that was brought back to me from California on issue 3 before I ever found out about it. Scud, my shop down here carried issue 1. And I
Oh wow.
remember selling out of issue 1. And I had wondered for years because I was fairly young when I was doing that. I was just working at the shop for no money so I could get discounts on books. I had
Yeah.
wondered for years, how the hell did I even know what Scud was? I would say that paid off huge. And
Yeah.
you're talking about this independent scene in the '90s. Ben Edlund, Jonan Vasquez. These are like guys who have gone on to literally define the generation, and you
Yeah.
smoked the crap out of them.
Oh,
Uh,
give me a break. And Ben is doing real good.
well,
Yeah,
no, 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 no. I mean, at the time with the books and stuff, that's what I mean. Ben
uh,
obviously, the Tick has gone on to become a kind of a
yeah.
franchise unto itself.
Oh well, you're sweet for saying that. I think they all. I mean, we were all like in it together. We were brothers. Everybody was like going, "Hey, we're never gonna beat the big guys, but let's create our own world here." And we all kind of like say, "Hey, will you do a pinup for me? I'll do a pinup for you." Everybody was very brotherly about it. Like my food is still one of my good friends. I adore the guy. I'm a huge fan of his art. He's just doing so well. And yeah, it was a special time that I wish I would have enjoyed a lot more. I hate to say it, but I always kind of looked at Scud as, and it wasn't until recently that I stopped thinking like this. I was always like, even from an early age, I'm going to draw comic books to get into animation. And then by animation, I'm going to get into writing and directing TV. Then I'm going to get into film. That was always the goal. I was always like tomorrow based instead of living in the present. And that went on even after comic books. Is like I was directing TV shows that I never would have watched because I hoped, oh, if I do enough of this, I'll be able to get into to movies and TV and stuff. And eventually, I got my shot at directing Lego 2. And when that happened, I was like, okay, once I'm done with this, then I'm going to really do what I really, really want to do. But this is a stepping stone until that. And that kind of was a disaster. But it was a learning moment. of like, stop looking at things as a stepping stone and look at it going, this is fun. I'm hanging out with my friends. I'm doing good work. I like people. And I think I like working with the people that I am so much right now. And it took me a while to be very present in my art, and it took like that public humiliation and destruction of Lego 2 to really make me understand, like, what are you doing? Like, what are you doing? Like, I did not. I I look back at Scud and like, why didn't you have more fun? Why weren't you enjoying yourself? Towards the end, of course, as you even covered in your great documentary, was like, it was a rough time. It was a dark time, and I was like, I hate this, and I almost trashed it forever, almost like just burnt down the house and just left. And I'm so glad I didn't, I
I'll
mean,
never
like,
be able to thank you enough for coming back.
oh,
As a longtime fan, it meant so much to me after having seen your films and watching your shows and knowing that Scud had always been kind of a stepping stone to other places. Those last issues just they meant so much to so many of
oh,
us when they came out, Rob. They really
yeah.
did.
And to me too, I mean, really. And I think you might have mentioned this in the documentary, but the plan was, I'm just going to do a little coda at the end. It'll be like, 28 pages, and it'll be a nice little whatever. Maybe it won't even have anything to do with the story, but it's just going to say, hey, thanks, that's all, folks, and then just wrap it up, so it doesn't feel like such a. I don't want to send people home on that last issue. Oh my God, can you imagine reading that book and then the last issue is that's the end of it? It would be such a bummer. But I fell in love with Scud again when I was working on that, and it was that page in the first issue, and it was unlike anything I ever had done before in Scud. And it's just like this quiet conversation with drywall, grown up drywall, and Scud. Um, and like, the world has changed so much, and they're like at that stop sign float in the flying car, and drywall is like bigger than him now, and can speak English, and he's like, wow, you really changed, this is great. And like, drywall is just like, it's, why did you go? Why did you leave us? Like, it that was a very emotional page, and it felt like that was me talking to the fans saying, I'm so sorry. I'm really, really sorry that I did that to you. It was, and it was, I don't remember the exact words, but it was like, I can't tell you why. I just had to go. And, but I'm back, and it doesn't matter why I'm back, but I'll figure this out. And that was my contract, I think, to the reader, that I'm like, okay, I might have gone into this thinking that it was just going to be a playful little, almost a fuck you, like, goodbye. I'm on to bigger and better things. I don't got time for comic books anymore. But it made me go, this would be worse. Phoning this in would be worse than not doing it at all. So you better buckle up and really bring your game. And then from that page on, it was like, let's let's do it, let's go for it. And it was one of the hardest years of my life, but I look back at those issues going, I learned so much about myself, I learned so much about Scud. I was like, oh my God, that's why I did that. Or um it was also, there were times in the past where I would kind of draw something and go, good enough, and move on to the next panel. And I wasn't doing that with this one. It was like the first time that I would look at a page and go, I don't like this. I'm gonna toss it and do the page over again. I never did that before, and it was something like, oh, this might be the last time I ever draw a comic book ever again. Let's make it look like it. Let's look like this is. Let's go for it. There's that one page where there's like, I don't, I never counted how many panels in it, but I was like, how many panels can I stick on one page where it's just nonstop action? And that was my way of going like, let's just push it. Let's just push. Let's just like every page. What's a different way of laying out the page? What's a different way of examining this character? Or let's just have like a moment of these two friends talking. Just have them talk. Like just and not in a boring expositional way, but just in an emotional way. It's like when Drywall goes, okay, tell me, why was she so important? Why was that girl more important than us? And Scud's kind of like, I don't know. She wasn't very nice to me at first, but I was kind of hoping I could change her heart, and after all this running around, she would be with me, and it would make all this running around worth it. And that was kind of like my way of saying, I was kind of hoping that at the end of Scud, I would have somebody waiting for me, a life partner that would just accept me, because that's where it all started from, was acceptance. And I did, like Kate, my wife, who did like the foreword, she was a big reason why I did it. She was, I brought the first issue of Scud to our first date, which is embarrassing to say, but that's how I was like, I I still want I want to be accepted by, not because of me, but because what I can do. And I think, like Kate was like very, very supportive of. I look at some of those Scud vlogs back in the day where our apartment was just destroyed by this like zipatone all over the place, and pages and stuff and books and shit. It just was such a mess, and it took over our lives for a year. And she never complained. She would sit there and keep me company, and she was just such a supporter. And yeah, that's why the whole thing is dedicated to her. It's like the last page is for Kate.
It was
And
so nice reading that, man.
yeah, it was really, 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 really an amazing. My favorite page though is like when he says like, is it really over? And then she closes the heart, and she says, that now it is. I just like, when I did that, I was like, it doesn't happen often. I mean, we're all very self-critical of our art. I could do that better, or I could have said that better. But I was like, I don't think I could have come up with a better final, like closing of the loop better than that. I think that's like one of my best endings I've ever done, and I'll stand by that probably the rest of my life. But it was yeah, and that's what fans did like say. Like my friend Tom Sharpling, who I've worked with a couple of times, he was I met him because of Scud, and I worked with him on Crapopolis later on, and he was I don't know how it came up, but he was like describing Scud, and like somebody was like, because there's like a huge chunk of the people that I work with that don't even know that I had this life before writing and directing TV and film. Like they just assumed I was always doing this. I was like, wait, you did a comic book? And Tom was like, yeah, he did a comic book. And it's like, it's a book that really sticks the landing. It's one of the few things that, as big as it is, that is able to do that. And I was like, in usually I would be very humble and go, oh, it's okay. I was like, no, I agree with you. I think that worked out really, really, really well. I'm pretty satisfied
It
with
it was real. It was well worth the decade long wait. I'll say
that.
that. I never thought it would
That was the
happen,
other
and
that was the other thing, is like, I was like, if I'm gonna make people wait this long, it's got to be worth the wait. And that's why like it expanded from like a 28 to 30 page wrap up to like over 100 page like 4 issue mega thing. And I was like, this is what it deserves. You know, it's like after I wrote that, drew that Scud drywall page, I was like, wow, that was really good. And I had this moment of, fuck, now the whole book has got to be this good. And I don't know if you ever get to that place where you're like you're drawing or you're writing and you get to like, okay, I just went up a notch, might not be huge, but a notch. And now this, which was my best work, this is my best work. Do you want this to be always your best work? And you have to make a decision to do that. And usually what happens is that that leads to more work, which makes it, because it doesn't get easier. It gets harder to push yourself. And it's a scary time, but it's also a very exciting time too, where you're just like, oh man, because I hadn't drawn comic books in such a long time, and I didn't know if I could even manage it. I was like, how am I ever going to do this? But it just kind of snapped back in. And not only did it snap back in, but I was like, Mahfood even said, it says, it's crazy, but I think you draw better now than you did back in the day, which is weird because you haven't drawn this much since back in the day. And I feel like I was always doing art. I wasn't drawing necessarily, but I was doing a lot of sculpting back then, and I was doing a lot of writing and directing. And I think it's all the same muscle. Like people ask me, like, you're a multi hyphenate. So what do you do when you want to do a little bit of everything? How do you concentrate on one thing and get good at it? And I say, just do it all. Because I do think like creativity is all the same muscle. And I think, you know, if you draw really well, you probably could sculpt really well too. And if you write really well, you probably can direct really well. And if you can direct really well, you probably can edit really well. You know, like I think it's all connected in a certain way. So it doesn't, it wouldn't surprise me if some people who have been concentrating on one type of art for a long time switch lanes and go, how come this is coming so natural to me, or whatever. I think it's because you have it in your head, you know, and it's just a different, it's not a pencil, it's a hot glue gun. It's not a hot glue gun, it's editing software. It's all linked together.
You've always seemed like you had worlds in your head. And that's why it was really interesting to hear you talk earlier about the comics that you hadn't finished, where you got
Yeah.
really hung up on that. And then you went into Scud, which was essentially just the setup for a book, and then built the universe around it kind of unilaterally as you went along. I'm really curious as well about Fireman Press. That was one thing I could find virtually no information at all concretely about. Can we talk a little bit about what Fireman Press actually was, who all was involved, and how that came to be?
Peter Alberts and myself were Fireman Press.
Okay.
That was it. Fireman Press was created to do Scud the Disposable Assassin. Peter Alberts became my business manager, and I would do the story, the art, and everything, and he would work with the publishers and just, he was the business guy. He was the guy that was took care of like the taxes and stuff like that. All that essential stuff that just, if you're going to do a business, you need to do that. And eventually Dan came on, Harmon came on as like, like the regular writer. And eventually it was him and I like doing most of the writing. But I was always like front to back, like art wise, me. I would have help with like the dots, like Zach Rebecca was a art school friend of mine, still great friend of mine, who was in charge of that. Cause it was just like one step that if I could get one thing off of my plate, it would the workload would not be as good. And then Sandra Vogt, who's now Sandra Mars now, was like the graphic designer who would be in charge of like the poop and the t-shirt page, and then I had Dan String, who was back in the day like helping me out with like the computer covers and stuff like that. But like the bulk of the book, like the the penciling, the inking, the lettering, that was all me. Um, but Fireman Press Limited was just two guys, a telephone and a kitchen table. That was it. Um, and you know there was a closet full of T-shirts. So there was a lot of people thinking that it was like, oh well, there's got to be like a skyscraper somewhere in Milwaukee with like the logo spinning on it. It's like, nope. I mean, but I wanted to try to make it feel like that. I wanted to try to make it, you know, like especially when we were in Comic-Con, like I wanted to have like a bold statement. So we would have like a backdrop with the Scud logo really big. And Scud is a very minimal, simple looking character. So um, it was just like this bright yellow thing in this sea of dark, gothy looking 90s over detailed superhero comics. So Scud kind of just kind of shined like a beacon for the right people.
Everybody I always knew said that they could, it was easy as hell to find you at conventions. They were
Yeah,
like, you just look for that bright yellow and he
yeah,
just head right towards Scud.
yeah. That was from like my art school, like graphic design. Um, uh, just go the opposite way. You know, like if you want to stick out, do what everybody else is not doing. You know, and everything like that. The Image McFarlane, Rob Liefeld, super concentrated detail, lots of just I was like going, oh, that's so busy. I'm gonna go the opposite and be minimal. And yeah, so that was always the goal is, and to have like a name that was already in the. I mean, this is like early '90s. We were just like out of the Gulf War, so it's like Scud was being still talked about, like Scud missiles and stuff like that. And I was like, well, Scud kind of sounds like a name to me. It doesn't sound like a missile. So, but it also sounds like a fabric softener or like a laundry detergent. So I had this kind of Tide logo to put in there. And that also comes from like the Andy Warhol um, pop art influence that I just thought was just so fun.
That's one of the things that always spoke most to me about your art. And I didn't know it when I was younger, but the older I've gotten, like your appropriation of like different graphic design elements and drawing from different places and these very simplistic, bold color and line placements were like nothing I'd ever seen, which was really funny because at the time I was also really into Sam Keith, who's like doing the
Yeah,
Max, which is the fucking definition of the other end of the spectrum, you know?
yeah,
Uh,
yeah. I mean, but I mean, like Max was just also like a very surreal comic that it was created a world that I never really understood where he was coming from, but I knew that he knew what he meant. You know,
no, he
it's
didn't.
almost like David Lynch, where it's just like, I don't know what's going on, but he does. And as long as the guy driving the bus knows where we're going, I'm on board. So I and I'm I
Sam had
really
you fooled. He didn't know where the hell he was going with that book at all.
well, yeah, well, I don't know. I never finished the book to be honest. I loved the art and I loved and I was very excited when there was the MTV series
Oh,
that came out. That
I
it,
always dreamed of seeing something like that for Scud. I
yeah,
was
yeah.
missed opportunity for everybody else.
Well, yeah.
And another thing that I was going to ask about also while we're talking about Fireman Press, I know you only own half of Scud. Would Peter be the guy that owns the other half? If you
Yeah.
don't mind me asking, I'm sorry. That
Yeah.
was
It's yeah. Yeah. He owns the other. He
okay.
owns it's like I can do whatever I want with it creatively, you
That
know,
was going to
like
be my next
it's
question.
in
Yeah.
my control, you know, if I want to put out another book, if I want to shop it around, I can. It's just um it's just like wherever I sell it, I would have to share half of it with Peter, which is fine, which is, but it's like to a Scud is a hard sell. Scud is, and I've tried selling it many times, and it's just the log line. He's a disposable assassin that kills for money, and it's a comedy. And I mean, with movies like Deadpool and things like Suicide Squad being more and more accepted, maybe it's possible. Uh, but it's a lot of work and a lot of meetings and auditioning. It's something that is to do all of that work and then like only get half
Be double
is,
the work for half the money.
yeah, is it doesn't seem like good business to me. Just to be honest, it's like I'd rather come up with something new, and also, as sad as that might be for a fan who wants to see Scud move, but I want to see Scud move. I want to see all of that. Even if I didn't have that, just being in the business as long as I have, it there's there's so many compromises that have to be, like the discussion is always like, well, does Scud have to look like that? Can he look like Brad Pitt instead? And I'm like, why? Like that, just little things like that. It's like, oh, can Jeff not be a monster? Can Jeff be a person like a Hans Gruber? I'm like, well, okay, but why? It's like one of the most popular thing, loved things about the series. It's like the people making these decisions will never read the book. Like when I was doing the Oliver Stone thing, like they didn't know that the Plughead character was named Jeff. They were just like, who's this Jeff character that you're talking about? I was like, they had no idea. And everybody wants to change everything. And at one point, like DreamWorks was interested in doing it, and they were like going, "Hey, we got a good idea. What if instead of Scud the Disposable Assassin, what if he was called Scud the Disposable Superhero?" And I was like, "Well, he's not a superhero. He doesn't look like a superhero. Why?" Well, we've just been testing it, and we think parents won't let their kids watch or buy toys that have the word assassin in it. And I go, "Well, that's fine. It's not a kid's show. It's a hard R." And like, oh, we don't want to do a hard R. So it's like, well, then and they all want to change everything. They all want to do. So I don't know. I will never say never. You know, I'm always hoping to be in a position one day that, if there was a way that if I ever became a James Gunn level person where it goes, oh, okay, let's dust this thing off. It doesn't matter. I mean, I'm so rich that I don't care if I only get half of the money or whatever. And now I'm gonna kind of get a blank check to do whatever I want with Scud. It's maybe, then, but a lot of stuff has got it. That's a hard place to be in. It's not easy. Like I look at what Dan has to go through still, and he's got Rick and Morty. But that was kind of has its own issues. So it's a but yeah. I mean, like I said, never say never. The thing that makes me so happy is that there's still fans out there, people like you, inspiring a group of people, the right people, makes me very, very proud and happy. And that's really all I ever wanted to do. You know, to be
Really,
honest, if I look really into myself, is like, oh, my dream is to just have this thing that I'm proud of that inspires people. And again, it like back in the day, the whole point of it was to make it into the next thing. And now, and I believe you even said this in your thing, is that I've come to like go, it's best as a comic book. It's best as it is. And why why not just love that? Why not just, it's not a bad thing that it
No,
has.
and I don't mean it's a bad thing. I mean, they kind of
Oh,
missed the
oh, I know
boat
what you
with
mean.
it, but I was so happy when I came to my point in my research where you were saying Scott doesn't need to be adapted.
No,
I don't need that anymore. I'm kind of beyond that, a little bit past that. That was huge. And you could
yeah.
feel that in the end of Scud in those
Well,
last four issues.
there's people that have come to me and go, hey, we want to do this or whatever, but we have to do this and that. And I was like, and it feels great to go, oh, oh, thanks. No, no, thanks. Because I'm like going, why? And I think that's protecting me is like owning only half of it. It's like, okay, well, if I have to give up this thing that I'm really like emotionally attached to, it better be a really good thing. I'm not going to just like take anything, it better be a guarantee that it's going to be worth the emotional struggle and financial struggle that it would be to deal with this other thing. So that I think is the protection, you know, of it. And if something comes along, terrific. If it doesn't, terrific. I've got the book. The book is finished. The book looks great. Maybe I'll do a color version of it one day. That might be something I'd like to do, but it's that it that in itself, it's like 800 pages, and I'm like, oh boy, that's a lot of work, and either I don't have time to do it myself, and to pay somebody to do that, to do it well, would be a huge investment and stuff, and I would be doing a lot of work, and then at the end of the day I would have to share half of that with the partner. So it's you know
So
that
talking getting back a little bit more towards the books, one of the other things I was curious about was, I know you'd said you got about 3,500 or you remember about 3,500 on the first issue. And
yeah,
as I remember at my shop, as I said, I picked up issue one and was selling it. And, obviously we ordered heavy on issue one, but most series during the 90s experienced a dramatic drop off between issue one and two, and then between issues about two and five. And between two and five, you would lose between 60 and 80% of your readership for new books. That did not happen for Scud in my shop. It kind of built this niche audience that brought their friends in with them,
yeah,
and it kind of built and built and built. And eventually you were doing La Cosa Nostroid, and you were also doing Tales from the Vending Machine. And I was kind of curious, you talked a little bit about the Oliver Stone deal and all of that stuff. I'd rather not get, way deep and mired off into the Hollywood bullcrap that they put
yeah.
you guys through. But I'm curious, during that period, there was a lot of growth, a lot of movement happening with Scud and Fireman Press. And how did that all, how did that come to fruition for you?
It's I don't really know. I mean, I feel like um I wish I could say, yeah, we were really surprised where this was taking off, but I don't know if it was my own delusional manifestation of like going like, no, they're gonna like this because I like this. Like I'm entertaining myself, so if I'm entertaining myself and I'm having fun, somebody else is going to have fun too. And I think that's really the thing that I do with anything. It's like it's got to be fun. It's got to be fun to draw, and if it's fun to draw, it's fun to look at. If it's fun to write, it's fun to read. Um, I think we were always trying to push a new crazy idea that would get people talking. Like every issue, there's like, what's the new thing that we can do that will make people go, oh, you got to check out the next issue? Because we never wanted like each issue to feel the same. I think those first like 5 issues, I think there's a lot of different platforms. There's like one that takes place in the in the jail, one that takes place in the desert, one that takes place in a grocery store, one that takes place in a high rise. We wanted to just constantly change the environment and change the genre almost. And I think that's what made those earlier issues become really exciting, because you didn't know what you were gonna get next each issue. Where are we gonna be next issue? I think we had, if we had any kind of slump, I don't think we had a slump ever with selling issues. I felt like we were going up and then we plateaued at, I don't know, we were getting close to 10,000. I don't know. Maybe that was towards the end. Um, but I think when we started really kind of digging into like a story that was um, involved with, like, when Voodoo Ben came back and Susudio became like a regular player, and we started opening up like what is really going on with this world, and then Drywall having his origin episode, and like La Cosa Nostroid spinning off. I think there was a group of fans that were not into like this kind of non-random stream of consciousness storytelling, and we're kind of like, oh, why does Scud suck now? But then there was like other people that I think, and I get this more now, look, when people are reviewing the series now, looking back, that's when the series actually became like a story, like instead of like these kind of one-off little stunts of the month, this is where it's like, oh, there's something bigger going on in here. And like that's when the mythology kind of started coming whole, starting to get a little stickier and more answers and questions. And I think, but and to be honest though, that's when I started getting kind of bored with the show, with the series. And that's when we did the horse series, where I was like, oh, let's get back to like those kind of random one shots of the first 5 6 issues. And then the audience didn't like that either. Like people were like saying, I hate this. And then so that's when I started like getting really upset with the fan base, and also hating Scud. And that was like towards the end. And eventually I was like, Hollywood is calling. I just got a job doing Monster House. See ya. Like I'm done. And that was a rough time. That was a dark point. Everything kind of got really dark at that point, obviously.
Yeah, and I was gonna say I really don't want to harp or like dig or anything like that there, but I did find the AMA and a few other interviews and stuff where you spoke to just how unhealthy of a place mentally, physically, everything was
Yeah,
for you at that point. How even your art was beginning to suffer because of like the medication that you were having to take from your depression and stuff.
yeah, yeah.
Was that and again, I apologize, not to pry, was that more of a personal thing, or was that from the whole, for anybody who doesn't know, you guys had moved to LA to go be involved with the Oliver Stone film, and that kind of all went
Yeah.
the way of the dinosaur, to say the least,
Oh yeah,
because
yeah, yeah.
they obviously did not understand the concept. They weren't super interested in necessarily, I think, working with comic book guys was what I kept hearing from everybody
Yeah,
I talked to.
yeah.
Um, can you will you talk a little bit about just what was going on at that point, Rob? And if
Yeah,
not, that's
okay,
fine.
sure. Yeah, yeah. I mean, like, here's the thing: is like when you're like when you're 8 years old, going, I'm going to make movies someday, and here's my plan. I'm going to do comic books, and then I'm going to get into go into animation, and then I'm going to go. When you plan that along, when you plot that out, it's such an early age, and that's your identity. and you and things are going like, oh, this is going exactly as planned. I wanted to do a comic book. I'm doing a comic book. I want to get into movies and animation. Hollywood wants me to do movies and animation. Uh, Time to go. Like it, everything is going great. Oh, that's also around the time when the video game was like about to come out too. So I was like, I'm about to step into a world of explosion. You know, if this was a biopic, there would be like the needle drop song, and I would go through a montage of parties and famous people and everything, and all these kind of fantasies come into your life. And moving from the Midwest to Los Angeles was already kind of like a devastating thing to do, because it's like moving away from family, moving away from just moving away from it that already is a shit. This is a really really scary thing to do. I was like 27 at the time, and it was something that I said I always was going to do. I always was going to do, and and moved there and thought, okay, this is going to be, you know. And to be honest, I secretly, the real reason I went was to be with my girlfriend at the time, who had got into like a school in LA, and you know, I had a choice between breaking up that 3 year long relationship or moving along with her, you know. So I moved there saying I'm doing it to get close to the Oliver Stone project, but it was really for that. And cut to a month later, Oliver Stone's people are like going, "You moved to Los Angeles? No, you're not writing this. We're getting a professional screenwriter to write this." And seeing what they were proposing as, and this is what the movie would be, and I would be like, "This is terrible," and not having a poker face about that, and then and having like my agent at the time saying, "You got to stop doing that, or you're gonna get pushed out of this project completely." The video game coming out and bombing because the Sega Saturn was a platform that did not get accepted. And then the final straw was like my breaking up with my girlfriend. We were already, you know, like not to get too personal, but it was just like there were four things that were happening at the same time that were making me lose my mind, which was like just like having. I mean, luckily I had Dan. I had a friend with Dan, and we were working together on our dream. And luckily, uh, there was the Robert Zemeckis like Monster House thing that happened, which was great. But it was like there were so many things that, you know, when you go, oh, you got a movie deal, video game, moving to Los Angeles, you've got it made, and it never really, the motor never really turned over. You know, as much as you turned the key in the ignition, it just never turned over. There's like one, two, three, these things kind of fell apart. And I was angry. I was angry at the universe. I was very sad and scared, but I was mostly angry at the universe. And this is not something I'm proud of, but I was like pissed off because like I did everything I was supposed to do. I came up with a good comic book. I worked my ass off, and I lost my girlfriend, my movie deal, and the video game. It all fell apart. It within like 3 months. And there was a point where I was going to move back to Milwaukee, going, I can't do this. I can't do this. And luckily, you know, that just before that happened, we met with Robert Zemeckis's people, pitched the Monster House, and they went, "You got it." And that one door closed and one door opened, and that kind of turned into its own little mini up and down as well. So, but I think the big reason that I was upset and I wish I would have known Kate back then, and I wish I would have heard that bit of wisdom that she told me. It's like going, it was designed to be a cult thing. It was designed to only attract the right people. It was not supposed to be a gigantic blockbuster. It was not going to be huge. It was supposed to be what you achieved, a cult thing. And I wish I would have known that back then, because I was like going, I'm finally going to get the acceptance that I really, 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 really craved. And the irony is that I did. I just didn't know it, because I mean, the thing about, like, the good thing about social media, I mean, this is back in the day when I didn't even have an email address. We just had a website, and people, if you got any kind of fan mail, it was like a letter. So praise was few and far in between. Like, you would go to conventions and people would be very nice, but it wasn't until many, many years later that I realized how loved Scud was, just before I walked away from it.
I'm just glad you know now. It means a shit ton to a lot of us,
Oh,
man. And
thank
you
you.
and it's really funny because like at the time, like John Woo, we were talking about like having to get all these, the old shitty dubbed versions of the fucking movies from over in Hong Kong and how
Yeah,
fucking niche those were. And like John Woo and Tarantino and all those guys, those were the guys showing up in the front of your books. You were
yeah,
there.
yeah,
It just couldn't enjoy it, man. It
yeah.
broke my heart. And there was a few different AMAs where or there was an AMA and then one or two other interviews. We just alluded to stuff, and I really appreciate you sharing with us.
It's still one of the best things I've ever been a part of. It's one of the best conclusions I've ever did. I think the fans are some of the best people I've ever met, and yeah, my feeling with being like open about like this kind of suffering from depression, using art to help with the your own mental state. I think that's what art is there for, is to help you, program you into and deal with like emotions that you're like, I got all this sadness, or got all this anger, what do I got all this fear, what do I do with it? Just putting it into your art. I feel sorry for people who don't have art to deal with, like these kind of emotions. I mean, I mean, you and I, like, if we didn't have our art, we would probably go nuts, because how can you deal with like these struggles without having something to exercise it, like the not exercise like exercise, but like get rid of this demon in your brain, like I put it on the page, always put it on the page, whether it's words or drawing. So and also the thing when you suffer from depression, and it's something that you feel ashamed about expressing and talking to people, because people, like, when you start talking about it, people get uncomfortable and they don't want to hear about it, and you feel really lonely. You feel like there's something wrong with me. There's something, I'm stupid, I'm lazy, I'm weak, I'm not good enough. Everybody else has got it figured out except me. But I would say, you anybody that's listening to this that is like going through something that this sounds familiar, like, you're not alone. There's a lot of people like this, and I think that's why people like do gravitate towards Scud, is because even though it's a comedy and has a lot of fun, there's a couple of moments of melancholy in there that kind of hit home in a way that make people go, oh, okay, I connect with this. My soul, my spirit, my emotion, my heart connects with this. And I think that's the reason why it's still as popular as it ever was.
That emotional through line is what always hooked me. I
Yeah,
didn't know it at the time because it was so flashy and so beautiful and so brash. and
Yeah.
in my face and kind of I another thing that I also found really interesting about Scud is you hear a lot of people shitting on guys who write like their comics as television or movie scripts now. And Scud was totally unabashed about, this issue is dedicated to John Woo, or this issue is dedicated to Tarantino, and here's like the soundtrack that you should be listening to. These are the guys that I'm into. And that was going back to like guys like James O'Barr, like for The Crow for me, who was talking about soundtracks and stuff. So that
Yeah.
wasn't very alien, but you wearing that the Hollywood banner on your sleeve was something I don't think many people had really seen. I saw a lot of vitriol about it at the time. What does this guy fucking think he's doing coming into our industry to use it as a kind of a platform to another place? But the best thing about Scud was that emotional through line, and it's what made it work as a comic book. And I don't think that necessarily would have been possible without wearing those influences on your sleeve. You, did you get a lot of pushback from other creators and fans? Well, I guess you said there wasn't a lot of interaction either, though, at that point.
Well, I mean, you read like forums and stuff like that where people would go, "Oh, here's another guy who's using comic books as a platform to get somewhere else," or here's another Bet Endlin who's not going to finish his comic book because he's too busy doing the Hollywood thing. But I didn't get that from other creators because every creator is like going, I want a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, like I would like to, have like an Invader Zim, like there's like everybody is kind of secretly hoping that there's, and I think that's just like, well, if your book is popular enough, people are going to start talking about toys and video games and movies and TV series and things like that. I mean, like that's just a part of the business, that doesn't really happen with stuff that is unpopular. So I think it's just more validation. So I don't think there was any creators that were like going, "Oh, you sold out." There's a couple of fans, but I think I take that more as a compliment because it's just they're just going to be like, "Oh, you're going to stop doing Scud, so you can." I'm not going to be able to get more of your work in comics because you're busy with other stuff. Well, that's that's a fine compliment. Like I mean, it just means you don't want me to stop doing what I want to do. Stop doing my book. That's fine. I'm like that with a lot of stuff. I was like, oh, I'd love to see another this or whatever, but it's people got to move on and things have a shelf life, and I think Scud kind of in the comics ran the perfect amount of time, and I do think that 10-year gap only helped those last four issues be good because I was experienced and mature enough, and a lot of the emotion was able to be gone for me to really concentrate on just doing what that those last four issues were supposed to do, is to say thank you and goodbye. And you know it was, yeah, it was just like a big thank you to the fans, and in a weird way a thank you to my older self, or my younger self, really. It's like thank you for making those sacrifices, for working so hard, for creating something that really to this day is still such an amazing calling card, and something that I am so incredibly proud of. And yeah, and that's why when I saw like your three-part documentary, I was like, going, wow, I can't believe after all this time people are still talking about this. It's pretty great.
I
Thank you.
I had always loved Scud, but I was going back and I was rereading it, and it's hilarious you brought up that page where Scud is sitting with drywall, because I remember reading that and just having this kind of epiphany. I think there's something more going on here, and I really want to know more about Rob.
Yeah.
and that turned into a 3-year deep dive into basically finding out everything that I possibly could about you.
Yeah. What
And
else do you want to know? What else? What else?
well, I'm just it's I'm doing my best not to fanboy out on you right now and
Oh yeah.
kind of like filter through my thoughts. I do have to admit, been reading Scud since issue 1. Um, I think one thing that I would be curious about, obviously, comic books don't pay as well.
Yeah.
You split any profits you make off of Scud.
Yeah.
You've done some art book. Yeah, I know you have your art book out, the Art of Rob Schrab, which for anybody who's not checked it out, fucking do that right now. It's amazing.
Uh,
But I am one of those guys who's always like, I wonder if Rob will maybe ever draw something again. I'd love to
oh
see more
yeah.
art. I'm just
I
curious if you.
well, what the thing that I just did this week is I did a guest cover for Kid Cudi's Moon Man, which just is a new series that Image is putting it out. The first issue came out like this month, and you know, I would let's see. Actually, I probably can't show you.
So one thing that I am kind of curious to get into you a little bit about, I don't want to keep you for a whole heck of a lot longer. We've been talking for almost 2 hours. I know, I'm sorry,
Oh my
but
god! Oh my god! Sorry.
please do not apologize. I will sit and yammer your ear off all day. But your art process, originally when you were doing, Scud, from what I understand, you basically like had a very limited, as you've explained, had a fairly limited idea of like how to approach like production of a comic book. And I know originally you had, I can't remember his name, I believe is an inker that was supposed to kind of go back and kind of save yourself from you, as you put it in interviews a little bit.
Mike Chillian. Mike Chillian was not necessarily an inker, but when I was putting together like the whole shebang, not only the last 4 issues, but everything else, because um, some of those, because the original prints or I don't know, screens for the other books were lost in a fire in Canada because we were getting it printed up in Canada. And then, so the only copies of these pages were like the original art. And some of the original art I had sold. And some of the original art I only had like a really good Xerox of. And so Mike helped me rescan a lot of stuff, touch up a couple of things, um, just do a lot of like cleanup work on it, and just make it presentable for the rest of the issues. And then some of the pages, because later on, like I think like around like issue 13, we were doing all the zipatone dots, the grayscale dots, like on computer, and they were only on like these like hard disks that you would need a zip drive and stuff like that. And I was like, okay, I got this, but I don't have a zip drive. And even if I did, how do I hook it to my iMac? Like it. So my brother, who's like kind of like a tech whiz, would go on eBay and go, okay, we need to buy a zip drive, and then I need to create an adapter that can go from one to the other. And it was like kind of like this daisy chain of adapters just to plug it in to see what was on the disk, and then reformat it and stuff. And a lot of that, I mean, because there was like a good chance that Scud was just going to kind of fade away, because like all the books were kind of sold out. There was a couple of trade paperbacks, but no complete version of the series, or whatever. So um it was like it took a long time for everything to kind of get put together. And Mike was like, because I kept looking at stuff and going, oh, I always hated the way Scud looked there. I could probably redraw that. And he goes, no, 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 don't George Lucas this. This is not a special edition. And I was like, you're right, you're right. Like I might think it's cool, but I'm going to ruin somebody's memory of this. And let's just let's just keep moving forward with that. So he was like, very, very support. He was great. Mike is like one of my. He's a really good artist. He did a series on HBO Max called Tig and Seek, which was like this kid show that was really great. That unfortunately Max like just kind of got rid of for a tax write off. Unfortunately, which seems to be becoming more and more this, which is really really sad because it was a really great fun show that he put his heart and soul into for like 3 or 4 years. But he's a great guy. He's a really really great guy.
So I'm curious, I've looked at I haven't seen a lot of your original art. The only original art of yours that I've ever really seen is like sporadic stuff when you'll put stuff up on eBay.
Yeah.
But looking at your layouts and stuff, I'm curious what you even drew Scud with.
Oh well, it was an evolution. At the first issue there was a lot. There was some dip pens and rapidograph pens, and Zipatone was always there. Which I don't know if you ever worked with Zipatone, but it was like this. It is basically a big sticker that you kind of cut out and then you burnish it onto your art, and that's how you do it. It wasn't like a drag and click like in a Photoshop, which you can do kind of easily today. But I always prefer like the authenticity, the grittiness of the real deal. So um, even when we were, I was not really 100% happy with the Zipatone dots when we were doing it on computer. That's when I went back to the fourth issue or the last four issues. I went back to the original way I did it. I actually hung on to those Zipatones from the way back in the day because they became really hard to find. So I was like, okay, I'm never letting go. I used a couple of those on the Kid Cudi comic book too. So I should tell Scott that because Kid Cudi was a Scud fan back in the day, and that's why he came to me and said, "I need you to do a cover," and he was wonderful to ask me to do that. But the process would be always trying to figure out how to remove a step, because if I can remove a step, at least one step, I will have more energy and more time to spend on the inking. So I would take uh, like 11 by 17 graph paper and pencil onto that. And I use graph paper because I hate using rulers and measuring it up, and it's already the square is already there, so I just put it in that way. Um, and then I take a piece of vellum and I put it over that. And then with a light table, I ink onto the vellum instead of inking onto the pencil, which is back in the day you would do like on Bristol board, you would draw with like a blue colored pencil, and then you would either use a brush or your inking or whatever, and then when you would Xerox it, the blue wouldn't show up most of the time. For me, because I would dig really into it, you would see artifacts of the blue, and I didn't want to ruin my lines by erasing either the blue or the dark pencil, so put the vellum over that. And the thing about vellum is great is that not only can you ink on it, and I like really, really sometimes like really, really fine detail, you can take an X-Acto blade and kind of scrape off some of the lines or make the lines even thinner or give it a little serif at the end or we do a lot of stuff like that, or using like white ink to do splatters, or not just white out, not even to get rid of um mistakes, but to actually use them as like elements, especially if you're doing like stars or whatever.
So, you've talked about a little bit about, the fact that you are a multimedia artist. You're not just a drawn artist. You also were doing a lot of sculpting around the time.
Yeah.
Anybody who hasn't seen it, you should check out Robot Bastard. Great, great short film from back in the day. That'll really give you a good look at like Rob's ability to transpose stuff from the drawn page into reality. Also his Ween videos are also really great for that. But I was curious. Shocker Toys put
Yeah.
out the Scud figure. Were you involved at all in the Shocker Toys or the video games? I got a bunch of people that were asking me because you were a sculptor and you do a lot of multimedia stuff if you were involved with either.
I wasn't involved really with the action figure. Like I would have approval and things like that. I mean, like Shocker Toys is,
I did a special on Shocker Toys. You guys
you
can
know,
go check that
the
out if you
less
want to
said
know
about
more
that,
about
the
Jeff
better.
Beckett.
But that's another thing that's just like you go, oh, I got an action figure. I'm going to really make it now, and you're just like, yeah, you don't make any, didn't make. They just didn't pay me.
I was gonna say, even if they'd have blown up, Jeff would have never sent you a check.
No, no,
Shit.
no. It was but the thing about it, I go, it was a good figure. I mean, I think if you were a fan of Scud, you would love that figure. And I got an action figure. I got more out of it than he did, um, because I always wanted a toy based off of my comic book, and I did. So that's terrific. You know, I didn't buy a house off of it, but I don't think it was ever going to do anything like that. So, uh, but didn't have other than just like approval, which wasn't really a hard thing because the person who did the sculpt really understood the shape of Scud and the pose of, and the importance of posing Scud. Like I still people like send me like, hey, I did some stop motion animation with the Shocker action figure, and it looks so fucking cool. It looks so fucking good. It's really really cool. Um, with the video game, uh, tried really hard to be creatively involved with that, but the game, to be honest, was they had another game that was, I don't know, some kind of shooter up game, and what they didn't have like a real story that they really thought was fun enough. And somebody was a fan of Scud and said, why don't we just take Scud and put it over this other game? And so there was a little bit of tug of war with back and forth with that, of like going, why are we doing this? This has nothing to do with Scud. And it's like, well, the the game engine is programmed to do this. uh and because we kept like saying, well, why are we doing a scrolling game when like Doom and Duke Nukem are like the biggest games in the world right now, which are first person shooters? And they go, well, there was always some kind of technical question that didn't make any sense to us, that and I guess we were right, because the game didn't, the whole system didn't do well. So, but we got a game, and it was, not many. There's no milk and cheese video games. So, I mean, like, no offense to those guys, but I mean, we got a video game, we got an action figure, we got a movie deal. I mean, there's nothing really to complain about.
No, I was just curious. I had a lot of people ask me about the video game because I had never personally played it. I didn't own a Saturn. And so when I saw
Yeah,
playbacks of it, I was like, wow, that is really well done. And the same guy was talking, he was like, and that Shocker figure looks dead on. And I was like, yeah, that's a pretty good point. I don't know.
I mean, yeah, I mean, like the people involved with both, I think the business people on Shocker, whatever, but like the person actually doing the sculpt really understood it and got it. There wasn't a lot of hand holding, and I think that has a lot to do with going back to the simplicity of Scud. What is Scud known for? Scud is known for being posable. They weren't doing things like Scud has to have a neck. Like Scud. It's like Scud's. His head is just kind of rolling on his shoulders. His pinkies are out. I never had to say you gotta put the pinkies out. There wasn't a lot of hand holding with that. Same with the video game. Like they sent us a VHS tape out of the blue with just like some test footage of Scud running around. And from the beginning, I was like, these people know exactly what Scud, and they showed like walk cycles with drywall. And I was like, this is exactly how it needs to be done. And I think it was just, I think we were really, when I say we, I mean me. I think it was, comes down to like making a character that's simple, that is minimal, and just has a frame to put a lot of emotion on. So there was, there was more like just back and forth discussion and criticism on the logo, the Scud logo, than the actual character. So it was. So I think that was. I think
Wow.
that was lucky. I mean, I never really realized that until till now. They were like, wow, that could have been. I could have ended up with like an action figure. I go, yeah, we got an action figure, but it doesn't look anything like our. Doesn't even look anything like it. But say what you will about the disaster that the Shocker Toys thing was. They put out a good action figure, and the fans got an action figure,
It
and
took me 20 years. I paid the goddamn exorbitant eBay prices after I did that, Doc. I bit the bullet. I was like, I
yeah,
can't look at this figure for another year of my life after having ordered it at the shop and never gotten it. I'm doing it.
yeah,
I'm biting the bullet. I'm getting on eBay.
yeah.
So, like, I think I got about two more questions, and I will let you go, Rob. One
Okay.
thing is, you brought it up, and I have always wondered. Ditko is a hand guy. His hands are
Oh,
incredible.
yeah.
Lots of expression with his hands. When I look at Scud, your hands are undeniably Rob Schrab. And one of the things about that is always pinkies out, baby.
Yeah, yeah.
Where did that come from? How did that
Okay,
start?
okay, that's it. Okay, Pinky's Out came from, I don't know which short it was, but there was this Three Stooges short or whatever, where like Mo, Larry, and Curly are at a fancy dinner, and Curly is drinking his soup without a spoon, just drinking it out of a bowl. And Mo goes, hey, something like, come on, this is a classy place. And then Curly goes, puts his pinkies out. And if that's better. So I was like, oh, that's my way of saying he's classy. Pinkies out.
Right
So
on.
that's where that comes from.
I had
I,
always
I,
wondered
I
about
should really do a dig and find out what that is. That is, if you find it anywhere, I don't know which one it is, but it was like, yeah, if I remember correctly, it's like some kind of, they're at a fancy dinner and they don't want to be looked at as like a bunch of schmoes or whatever, so he just, he goes, puts his pinkies up. And I always thought that was so funny and so um clever. I don't know, maybe not clever, but just a
it's a
funny.
calling card. It's a
Yeah,
calling card. When you saw those pinkies, you were
yeah,
like, oh,
yeah.
Rob is at it again. It's
Well,
going
that's
down.
another thing is like, I have to like, every, if there's a place to put my iconography. I've always been big on iconography. What is something, if you wanted to dress up as Scud for Halloween, how would you do it? Okay, well, you get a yellow shirt with like, maybe a red long sleeve shirt on. But if you have like a gun, if you have your pinkies out, the right people will know who he is. So that's, yeah,
Kind of
double.
the outline of a figure, how they always say with a superhero, you should be able to tell by the outline who it is. Those
Right.
pinkies were always that
Yeah.
identifier.
I like a big on a silhouette, like if you saw just the silhouette of Scud, you would go, oh, okay, who is that? Oh, Pinky's out. Let's go.
Lakoza Noasteroid was something else that I've had quite a few people ask me about. Anybody who doesn't know, Rob did 3 series for Fireman Press that all involved the same universe. There's Lakoza Noasteroid, Scud the Disposable Assassin, and then Tales from the Vending Machines. And Tales from the Vending Machine was just stories by different creators that they would bring in that were like one-offs. Like Trent Kanuga did an issue and that kind of stuff. There's some really interesting stuff. But La Cosa Nostroid actually was written by Dan Harmon and had an ongoing narrative story
Yeah,
that
epic.
wasn't necessarily part of Scud, but it was, directly involved in that universe. And
Oh
I've
yeah.
had a lot of people ask me over the years, I know that Edvis was also the one who drew that. You didn't even draw La Cosa Nostroid, so that
I
wasn't really.
drew the first issue. Drew the first issue and drew like the first three covers.
I was gonna
But
say, I know
like,
you did all the
yeah,
covers.
yeah, La Cosa Nostroid was like, because there was such a demand for Scud, and I just was like, I can't do it. So I said, well, why don't we do a spin-off? So the months that Scud doesn't come out, La Cosa Nostroid would come out, and maybe we could make a bigger profit. But I mean, it I don't know if that worked. I mean, I know we did a bunch of issues. We did a lot of issues of La Cosa Nostra. I think the thing that screwed it up is that because we did Roman numerals instead of just like regular numerals, because even to this day I'm like going, which one is it? Is it the one with the V and the I? I think we got too fancy with that, but I think that was the thing that kind of. But we did. I mean, looking back, we did like at least like 7 issues, didn't we? I think.
Yeah, I was gonna say it was either 7 or 8 issues, right around
Yeah,
there.
which is not a small amount of work. And that one went unfinished too, which people have been asking me, "Are you ever going to finish that?" I think, well, that's Dan's book. I can't really. I wouldn't feel good about finishing it up because I know he always had a plan. Dan is different than me when it comes to like looking back at stuff. I don't feel like he has like the same kind of nostalgia for things in the past as I do. I think he kind of like moves forward. Especially when it's like not something that he was like 100% like. Community is different and Rick and Morty is different, but like Scud was always mine, and La Cosa Nostra, even though he wrote it, um that was always his. That was always that's still it was his, but it was still mine at the same time. So I think, I mean, he's talked a couple of times in the past of like, oh, that would make a good show. That would make a better show than Scud. Just the concept of like cyber mafia is something that he has expressed. Like, it'd be fun to kind of maybe do something with. I don't know. It's up to him. Up to him.
Right on. And I was curious about Edvis as well. What is he up to? I don't know. He
I
kind of
don't
just
know. I mean,
disappeared.
yeah, he did Doctor Grave, which is the show, the show, the comic book series that made me go, this guy's good. This guy understands like working in black and white. He understands action. He was really fun to work with, but he always was kind of like, like any of us, an oddball, a recluse. He would kind of go away and come back and go away and come back. Like I had him do like a panel in the whole shebang where it's like Tony and and Marandino facing off. Like that. I didn't draw that. That's him. Uh, so that was my way of like kind of, that might be your last glimpse at La Cosa Nostra. I don't know. Trying to put the band back together again, having him be involved in some way.
And speaking of putting the band back together, I am just about, excuse me, I'm just about done with you. I swear to God. But it's the 30th anniversary of Scud
Yeah.
this year, which makes me both incredibly nostalgic and also feel incredibly old and sore
Uh,
at the same time somehow. I'm sure that you can't commiserate with that feeling at all.
oh no,
But
yeah.
a few years ago for the Scud the 26th anniversary, you did something really awesome. I had never been able to make it to a show. I had never met you. And your limited art, your original art is very limited. You don't do much of it. You're a very busy guy. I don't see shit for it pop up on the secondary market. But for the 26th anniversary, you did one of the coolest things that I had ever seen. I just so happened to be dropping my very first video that I'd done, which was just a flip through and me gushing over Scud on the day of the 26th anniversary. And when I posted it, I saw on your Twitter that if you bought stuff off of your eBay page, you gave away free sketches.
Yeah.
And it was amazing. I've got it sitting right on my wall. And it
Oh,
says
oh, really? Oh, okay, cool.
yeah, it's one of the. I think I got the first one, the first order that went in after midnight because I posted my video and I saw that and I was like, I was sitting waiting and I was like, when is California time turn
Yeah,
12?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
I was curious, do you have anything in mind? I know you had spoken to me a little bit about doing some editing on something for Scud and
Oh,
that kind
okay.
of stuff,
Well,
so
here,
I didn't know what you had in.
what I did, I did a couple weeks ago is I had like a bunch of friends come over, and we shot like kind of like a Scud the Disposable Assassin 30th anniversary special, where it's just me talking with friends and throwing to clips of like old news footage, stuff from conventions, animation tests, things like fan films and things, and I'm working on that right now. I wanted it to have be out by now, but I had a little bit of a computer problem, so I'm having that get fixed, and then I was going to jump into it. Plus, I'm wrapping up the latest season of Rick and Morty, so it's going to come out later than usual. But I'm that'll be out on SchrabHomeVideo.com. So just watch my Instagram and Twitter feed or whatever. It'll start popping up relatively soon. It'll be um, it's a fun time. It's just it's looking back and just kind of just talking about what we're doing right now. But it's going to be like an all day event where it's going to be multiple interviews and stuff like that. So, and that's where I wanted to show your history of Scud. In between those segments, I wanted to kind of pop in. Here's part one. Here's part two. Here's part three.
Wow,
Yeah.
I'm humbled, man. Thank you.
Oh no, I'm humbled. If you don't mind, I was gonna probably chop out like the gear stuff.
No, take
Does
out
that?
anything that you want.
Yeah, yeah. But I wanted to make sure that if there was a logo or a website or something to redirect the fan base to you, let me know. Like, do you want them to say? Because I would put like a lower third. Do you want? Is there like a JerkComics.com, or where would
It
you like people to kind of
the
find?
the YouTube channel is the best place for me. That's the
Okay,
place where I think most people will find what they want from me most. The
great.
other place would be Instagram. I interact mostly on those two. I do a lot of live streaming on Twitch and stuff, but
Okay, but yeah, if you send me your logo, I'll give you like I'll put that on there too.
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And so yeah, your YouTube page, all right? Okay. I will share that. But yeah, yeah, I'll try to make it look as slick as possible.
I don't care as long as you as long as it just really puts a smile on my face knowing that you got a kick out of it. When I
I love
make those videos,
man.
it's so nerve-wracking to deal with something that is so near and dear to my heart. And you'll spend 2 or 3 years digging around and doing research and pulling out these really obscure interviews and little tiny quotes and trying to intimate things. And I'm just always afraid that I'm either not getting to the heart of something or I'm not doing justice to it. So
Yeah.
it really does. It means a lot to me.
Oh well, thank you. It meant the world to me just to see that, like somebody that put the time into it and was so many deep dives. It's great to collect those memories. It was like just going through a scrapbook of like, oh man, I remember that. Oh, that was great. And just the way you ended it with the fear and loathing quote was like so like it made me just have like this warm and fuzzy feeling in my chest of like that was a great time. That was a really really great time. That'll never happen again. That was, and that's what makes it great is that is only Scud could have only happened in that time. Could have never not happened today.
It was an incredible experience. I'll never be able to thank you enough for sharing yourself and your art and what you've given to me, not just with Scud, but with everything. I mean, you're continuing to this day right now. I mean, I got a freaking Rick and Morty lighter in my lap. And no, that's not because I'm doing an interview with Rob. It's just because
Uh,
he's omniscient in my life. He's everywhere and always has been.
Thank you.
And I cannot thank you enough for reaching out to me and doing this interview. I know that you're a busy guy, and this has been an incredible walk down memory lane. It always made me sad to hear you speak about how you didn't live in the moment and you weren't necessarily always able to appreciate Scud when it was happening. So I really hope that the further time telescopes and the more of us fans that you meet and interact with, the more that you know just how much this really did mean to all of it. I know it's a silly little cartoon robot to some people, but to a lot of us, it is an inextricable part of our life. So thank you, Rob.
No, thank you. No, that was the goal. That was always the goal. Always the goal is to 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 touch the right people. Yeah.
I don't know if I'm the right guy, but you touched me, bud.
Okay. Well, that sounded way more inappropriate than it needed to be, but yeah. Uh, but but thank you. No, no, Roman. This has been great. I really thank you. Keep in touch. Let me know what you're working on. Like you're an incredible artist. It's really great to see. I didn't know you when I saw your YouTube page. I didn't know until much later that you like can draw quite well yourself.
I I seriously appreciate that. I don't think I draw, but I got diagnosed with essential familial tremors a few years ago, so I get really bad shakes in my hands, and when
Oh,
I look at my lines, I just get embarrassed a lot of times because they're all scratchy and just I'm so
that
jealous of guys like
turn it
you that
up
are
to
just
11, man. Anything you're insecure about, that's what makes you special.
I'm taking away as much from this interview as I can. And when you were talking about earlier about strengths and weaknesses, I was like, yep,
Every
put that up
weakness
in here.
is your trademark. Every weakness is your brand. It really is.
All right, man. Well, I will let you go. I again thank you so much. Everybody, keep an eye out on the channel. Not if you don't catch it on Rob's channel, you will definitely catch it either on my Instagram, my Facebook, or a mention of it on my YouTube channel when the Scud 30th video that Rob is talking about drops, because I'm gonna be on that like white on rice. Guys, if you haven't done it, go out, check out Scud the whole shebang. Make sure that you're checking out Schrab Home Video. Like Rob's got a bunch of really cool stuff that I know a lot of us that have been following him for a lot of years have been into. But if you haven't been keeping up with what he's been doing since comics, highly recommend it. And as always, guys, I really, truly, and honestly ask only two things: keep reading comics and keep supporting independent artists. If you did enjoy what you saw, make sure you hit that like button. Think about getting in the comment section below and letting me know if you really enjoyed what you saw. Make sure you Hulk smash that subscribe button. If you do that, make sure you ding the little notification bell so you never miss another video or premiere. Again, if you feel like you're in a position to help the channel grow, think about using the link in the description below to sign up for my Patreon page. For as little as $3 a month, you get access to tons of behind the scenes posts, updates, exclusive content like uncut interviews, and you can even get your name in the credits. If you want to support the channel, if Patreon is not your thing, have no fear. You can finally sign up for membership right here on YouTube. Just hit the little join button and make sure to select the tier and the perks that fit you best. If that's not enough, you can also make one-time donations towards specific goals or just tip the channel using the Ko-Fi link in the description below. And you can even pick up your very own JerkComic shirts like the ones you see on the screen now. As always, this video was brought to you by the Jerk Broadcasting Service, as well as generous grants from the Patreon, Ko-Fi, and YouTube members you see on the screen now. I seriously want to thank every single one of you that supports the channel and helps make these videos possible, with a super special thanks to my loyal Wednesday Warriors, Channel 10, Chasen, Clinton Salvini, and Mike Dolan. I really hope the quality and content is getting better, and I can't wait to see where this next year takes us with your continued support. Thank you again for helping this crazy dream of mine become a reality.
and for sticking with me. I hope you all enjoyed, maybe even learned something. And as always, I really, truly, and honestly ask only two things: keep it in those local shops and keep reading comics.